Brian Holdsworth, you naughty fertility pervert. How can I say such a thing? Brian's such a nice guy. Look what he's doing. He's perverting the order of nature regarding the conjugal act. How does he work on his own damnation? By promoting it, and NFP, that is, which is a mortal sin. We're going to get into exactly why it's a mortal sin, okay? Brian, sorry to break the news, but we got to do this. We're going to go through his video, and I'm going to do it as quick as I can. I know you guys don't like when my videos are super long, but we got to cover some stuff. And I'm going to, again, be efficient as much as possible. But Brian's got big problems, and he makes this slippery video. So we're going to go through it piece by piece and get it straight. I'm John Farrell, your NFP spiritual dictator. This is Annulment Proof. On that happy note, we're going to dive into Brian Holdsworth being stuck in his perversion of truth, okay? And he is stuck. And I'll tell you why Catholic Inc. gets stuck, because there's so much riding on keeping this house of cards alive regarding finances, and just typically we're going to show how I think his wife wanted to use contraception. So there's just a lot of politics in this. It keeps everybody stuck. And then, like this song just said, you can't get to truth when you've got a perversion. It makes it really tough to find your way out. Enter Annulment Proof. Here we go. Let's get to Mr. Haircut. Where is he? Share this tab. Check this out. See what he's got to say. Go ahead, Brian. Hit it.
Church in our eventual matrimony, and though we knew we could not use artificial contraception for its obvious moral impairments, we were consoled that natural family planning methods would be available to us, as well as the very convincing sales pitch that such methods were 99% effective in preventing pregnancy, which is what we intended to do after we got married. Which raises for some the very obvious question: if your default intention is to prevent pregnancy as a married Catholic couple, what's the difference between that and just using artificial contraception?
Nothing is the difference. This video is tricky. Like I said, we're going to get into it. Now, as I mentioned, or I haven't mentioned it yet, but I'm going to show you right here. Sigmund Freud, he says when you take the conjugal act and separate out the reproductive purpose, you get nothing but perversion, and that's exactly what has happened. This is why I say we have to solve this NFP first. So here we are talking about it. Now, let's get back, okay? These guys, he wants his NFP because like I said, I think his wife wanted the contraception. We're going to explain what is the correct, why this is wrong, but let's get into it.
Especially if the outcomes are exactly the same. And I think the perception for us was that this issue is one of those things that separates serious Catholics from lukewarm Catholics. And we wanted to think of ourselves, and not just think of ourselves, but actually be serious, faithful Catholics. So we were going to be one of the NFP couples rather than a contracepting couple.
That's a common thing. It's like, look, we got NFP for you instead of contraception, so isn't that the idea, right? Because everyone contracepts, so we're going to do NFP instead. Isn't that good? Actually, no family planning is good. There's some notes I'm going to show you on that.
But again, some will claim, well, that NFP isn't really any different from contraception. I even had a friend who is a recent convert, whose privacy I'll protect, but shout out to Mike. What's up, buddy? He asked me if there was any difference between them, because as far as he could tell, there wasn't.
Don't worry,
so
it's going to get juicy, guys.
Questions out there about this topic, and depending on who you listen to,
it's going to get juicy. Hold on.
A variety of answers. It's going to have as much to do with opinion as it does with actual church teaching. And for my wife and I, we came of age during the era of theology of the body, which I'm not going to take anything away from.
He's not going to take anything away from theology of the body. Oh, yeah, he sure as heck should. All theology of the body is a fancy pants way of saying procreation secondary. That's all it is. Okay? And he has to have procreation secondary because otherwise he can't have his NFP.
Except to say that the popular versions of that by people on like the speaking circuit.
I wonder who he could possibly be talking to. Could it be Christopher East? I mean, Christopher West. Yeah.
We're often a bit, I don't know, quirky. And I'd say we picked up some ideas that could really benefit from correction. And
whatever. It doesn't matter. The whole theology of the body is not Catholic. because again, all it's done is it's replaced procreation with the personalistic norm. Okay, the significance of Christ and his church has now become the nature of the relationship. Okay, which means everything's egalitarian. Let's not digress.
Whether the question for you is contraception or something else, the way to evaluate serious moral dilemmas is something that every Catholic should be fluent in, because the church gives us those tools, but somehow most of us seem to be oblivious that those tools exist or how they can be applied. And yet we're out here making serious moral decisions every day, seemingly with blindfolds on. So one helpful first step in discerning any moral question, especially controversial ones, is by examining the rival extremes that make it a controversy. Because
okay, so this is what he gets wrong. He starts saying it's just kind of like he says NFP is on a spectrum, a little bit or none, or a little bit or a lot. Like abortion is on a spectrum. That's where his first error is.
Subtle taught, and the church fully adopted this idea in great doctors like St. Thomas Aquinas, that good virtue is found in the mean between the excess and the deficiency. So, for example, if friendliness is a virtue, and it is, by the way, then the
So he's going, like I said,
like quarrelsomeness, and the excess would be obsequiousness or being prone to dishonest
he's
flattery.
building the case
so what
that
are the rival extremes of the
NFP
question
is
of natural
natural, so it's just a matter of
you would have people who say that NFP is no different from contraception and therefore can never be morally justified. In other words, you can never have a good reason as a couple to avoid getting pregnant.
You can have a good reason to avoid getting pregnant. That doesn't have anything to do with NFP. If you can't get pregnant, you don't do the thing where pregnancy comes from. Super simple. That's called virtuous continence, which we'll get into in a minute, okay?
Or spacing out periods between pregnancies by using the natural rhythms of fertility. The other extreme would say that as long pregnancies by using spacing out periods between, never have a good reason as a couple to avoid getting pregnant, or spacing out periods between pregnancies by using the natural rhythms of fertility.
As in, he's saying using NFP. Okay. Yeah. So he's assuming that, like I said, it's legitimate to use, which it's not.
The other extreme would say that as long as you restrict yourself to those natural methods, you can avoid pregnancy for as long as you like, or for any reason the couple or one member of the couple gives for doing so as legitimate according to their own conscience and their own prudential judgment.
That, what he just said, is the exact position where NFP leads you. Because it's natural, and if open to life is the default and NFP is open to life, then NFP is the default, and everyone has a right to unity, because the conjugal act must no longer be only procreative, but it must be unitive, and the personalistic norm is the basis for everything. So he just said, for any reason or no reason whatsoever, unilateral or otherwise, you can use NFP. That is the only logical position for NFP. That's it. That's what it's evolved into. It can be unilateral for any reason. There's no other. This is why it's all promoted and stuff. Let's just listen to that one more time, because I thought it was pretty interesting.
Of fertility. The other extreme would say that as long as you restrict yourself to those natural methods, you can avoid pregnancy for as long as you like, or for any reason the couple or one member of the couple gives for doing so as legitimate according to their own conscience and their own prudential judgment.
That's right. That's all NFP is today. There's nothing else that makes sense except one or two people can do NFP if they think it makes sense, because it's just nature. There's no duty to procreate. That's it.
And I would say both of those extremes are incorrect. So to find out,
and there's the other, sorry, hang on, let's keep going.
What the right approach is, we can anticipate that it will be something like a mean between those two extremes. Another church that the tool gives us to evaluate moral questions is the criteria by which we can know something is moral or immoral, which are the object, the intent or the ends, and circumstances. If you can check off those three boxes as part of your moral discernment, then the thing you are doing is at least justified, if not morally good. So what are those? The object is the act itself.
All right. So yes, he's going to go through his 3 checklist reasons, 3 things to decide if something is moral or not. Right. Right. Natural. Okay, that makes sense. Let's listen.
And this usually boils down to whether or not it's intrinsically evil or not. If it's intrinsically evil, then it's always wrong and can never be justified.
That's right.
There's no rationale you can give that would make these acts permissible.
Can never be justified. Okay. So if it's intrinsically evil, it can't be justified. But if it is intrinsically unnatural, or if it is in fact unnatural, then it's not about justice anyway. It can never be made conformable to nature. Okay, so it's not about whether we can justify our NFP or not. Justice has zero to do with it. It's only about nature.
So these would include things like killing innocent people, defrauding or exploiting the working poor, fornication, sodomy, blasphemy, and on and on. If you can't check off this box, then there's no point in going on to the other two criteria for further evaluation. But if the act...
Okay, so yes, you can't check off that box. NFP is intrinsically against nature. It's always wrong. You can't go any further. We're going to go further in the video in a minute, but let's go to our notes, okay? Hang on, you guys. We got to get through this. This is cool. Here, let's make it bigger, okay? And we'll go through these notes, and we're going to find out about why it's intrinsically evil. Let's just start with Tobit. Tobit 6, Old Testament. For they who in such manner receive matrimony as to shut out God from themselves and from their mind give themselves to their lust, as the horse and mule which have not understanding. Over them the devil hath power. Over Brian Holdsworth the devil hath power, because he's shutting God out from he's got the horse and mule geared up, okay, instead of trying to procreate, okay. More on that in a minute. We're gonna go. I got to skip around here to get some of this right. All right, let's go. We're going to find out why it's intrinsically evil, okay? St. Francis de Sales' Intro to the Devout Life, the French version, all right? For it frequently debilitates, he's talking about the conjugal act, okay? In certain cases, it can be very dangerous. It frequently debilitates the soul with venial sin, and we're going to go for what Aquinas says and why it's venial sin. In cases of mere simple excess, okay? And sometimes it kills effectually by mortal sin, as when the order appointed for the procreation of children is violated and perverted. Bam, right there. Mortal sin when the order of procreation is violated and perverted. It has nothing to do with how you get there. It's when you decide that the order is going to be changed. So the purpose of any family planning is to reverse the order, to pervert the order, to procreation secondary. We're open to procreation, but we're not pursuing procreation. Just being open isn't, no. That's like being agnostic. I'm open to God's existence. Can't do that if you're going to go to heaven, okay? Now, if you pervert the order, it's according to the case, departs more or less from it. The sins are more or less abominable, like onanism and NFP are various levels of abominable, but always mortal. If you pervert the ends, it's always mortal. NFP is always mortal sin. It always is, okay? It's in Casti 59. Anything I say you guys don't like, you want to talk to me about, don't be shy. Like I always say, the difference between me and everybody else on YouTube is I will talk as long as you need in the comments. That's the difference. There's no one else I can think of that I can find that will actually go there. They just like, you might get him a little bit. Tim Gordon is bad on that. He doesn't go anyway. Anyway, for the procreation of being principal ends, okay. I don't know, some circumstance. Yeah, this basically is saying that sometimes when it's out of your control, it still can be natural. But NFP is in your control, okay? So as long as you're not doing anything against the principal end of marriage, no accident, whatever, being able to prejudice the law. So you have to always keep that principal end. We'll go with Casti Connubii here a little bit while we're here. And then I got some Latin version of Casti. All right. 53. And now, venerable brethren, we shall explain the evils opposed to each of the benefits of matrimony. All right. When you frustrate the marriage act, okay. Oh, wait, maybe we're getting ahead of things. Let's go back to the video. Just a minute. Hang on a second.
Act in question can be justified under certain circumstances.
All right, we got to go to
then we can move on to the other criteria.
They're talking about the other.
Let's take something like
let's
donating
skip all
money
the other
to
stuff
charity.
because he's just going through
intrinsically
stupid
evil?
stuff.
Disqualify the act. But if the charity is a
not
good
intrinsically
organization
evil. Okay,
putting
here we
that
go.
donation to good use, then we've managed to check all of the three boxes. So
All right,
what
so
about
he's gone through his three boxes and he thinks NFP qualifies for all of them. NFP is discounted in the first round because it's not natural. Nothing unnatural can be conformable to nature. Casti Connubii 54, I think we were going to read that. So That's it.
The question of using natural family planning and contraception. Well, to begin with, the church disqualifies contraception on the grounds that the object is intrinsically evil. It can never be justified. So
it is against nature, so it's not about justifying using it because he says it's intrinsically against nature. I think he says that later in the video, but that's why contraception is wrong, because it perverts the order of the ends, as all family planning does.
So that's simple enough. But what about continence in marriage in order to avoid pregnancy, while also allowing conjugal acts during periods of infertility?
Continence in marriage in order to avoid pregnancy. Basically, I think he's describing NFP. Continence in marriage in order to avoid pregnancy is called virtuous continence. And yes, you can do that if you obviously, because there's no requirement to make babies. You don't have to do the conjugal act if you don't want to, other than marital debt. Hang on, let's see what he said.
Can never be justified. So that's simple enough. But what about continence in marriage in order to avoid pregnancy, while also allowing conjugal acts during periods of infertility?
It's not continence if you're allowing conjugal acts. It's like fasting and eating at the same time. No such thing.
Is that intrinsically evil?
Yes, because if you're doing so to avoid pregnancy, you are perverting the ends. It is intrinsically evil because it's not natural. I'm going to show why more in the notes. And if any of you don't think I'm wrong about this, I will nail it down very clearly in the comments. No problemo. Okay. I've tried to get through to Brian in the comment section on his video. It's like nowhere to be found.
The church says no explicitly.
Wrong. The church says yes explicitly. Okay. No. We'll do a little bit we'll go back to his juicy video in a second. Let's look a little bit of this. Okay. All right. Hold on, you guys. So the church can't say that NFP is wrong one day and right the next day. It cannot say that the perversion. Oh, shoot. Someone's here. Just a second. Okay. I had to take care of a customer. See if I can remember where we are. Anyway, by frustrating the Marriage Act, some justify this criminal abuse on the ground that they are weary of children and wish to gratify their desires without the consequent burden. What could that sound? That sounds like family planning, doesn't it? Okay. Why do people even do family planning? It sounds like it's because they want to gratify their desires without consequent burden. Others say they cannot remain continent, nor on the other hand can they have children because of difficulties, whether on the part of the mother or on the part of family circumstances. Wow, what does that sound like? They can't remain continent, so I guess NFP isn't continence, right? They can't remain continent, nor can they have children. Okay, so because of like indications, like they say. Anyway, then we have but no reason, however grave. You've heard this before, heard a lot of times. That is why all family planning is unnatural, because it doesn't matter how tough your circumstances are. You need to do the conjugal act sometimes, but you can't have kids. What's the solution? It's called virtuous continence. Honest continence, they call it. That's the only solution. It's not periodic. There's no periodic continence isn't continence at all, which we'll get into. No reason, however grave, may be put forward which anything intrinsically against nature. Notice he doesn't say immoral or unjust. Intrinsically against nature may become conformable to nature and morally good. Since therefore the conjugal act is destined primarily by nature for the begetting of children, okay, it's going to be intrinsic. It's a sin. It's a sin to deliberately frustrate the natural power and purpose. What is the purpose? It's procreation. Let's go back to the video and we'll see what else is going on like that.
In Pius XI's encyclical Casti Connubii, in paragraph 59, he explicitly says that couples who come together in times of infertility for the sake of the secondary ends of conjugal love, such as...
Whoa! Oh, okay. Like I said, this is where he's really getting into it. This is rapid fire crazy, okay? Every little word is goofy. We got to go back. Okay, hold on.
In Pius XI's encyclical Casti Connubii, in paragraph 59, he explicitly says that couples who come together in times of infertility for the sake of the secondary ends of conjugal love, such as
couples who come together in times of infertility for conjugal. I got to get this again. I wonder if we can listen to it slow. Let me try that. You guys, he sounds really funny.
Is that intrinsically evil? The church says no explicitly. In Pius XI's encyclical Casti Connubii, in paragraph 59, he explicitly says that couples who come together in times of infertility for the sake of the secondary ends of conjugal love.
Who come together for the secondary ends of conjugal love? Whoa, wait a minute. Okay, there's two problems right there. It's not coming together for conjugal. Okay. It's not conjugal love. It's just the conjugal act. This is his TOB personalistic norm showing. Okay, he's saying conjugal love is number one. So this is where there's so much confusion and it gets so goofed up. Let's listen to his little drunkenness thing one more time.
And he explicitly says that couples who come together in times of infertility for the sake of the secondary ends.
No, he does not say couples who come together in times of infertility for the sake of secondary ends. That is the overturning of the hierarchy. Let's go back and check out what Casti says. Like I said, Casti 59. Did we already go through it? No, 53. Let's go to 59. We'll go to midwives in a minute. Let's go to 59. Okay. Maybe we'll go to the English version first. Let me see if it's up here. Wow. Okay, I guess I only have the Latin version, but that's okay. Latin version is just as good. 59. Holy Church knows well. Okay, so this is where NFP is condemned right here. But we'll get back to that in a minute. All right. So, nor are those spouses said to act against the order of nature. The order of nature is procreation primary. Again, this is the Latin translation of Casti. Okay, who use their right in a correct and natural way, even for natural reasons, whether of time or certain defects, new life cannot arise from it. So, they are said to act, nor are these spouses said to act against the order who use it in the right natural way, even for natural reasons. Okay. So they're saying it's not that they're pursuing secondary ends. You always must be pursuing procreation. If procreation is out of your control, you know what I mean? Somebody's barren or there's menopause or something, it's out of your control. You are not pursuing secondary ends. You always must be pursuing primary. God's in charge of fertility, okay? You don't get to pursue secondary first. That's mortal sin. Aquinas says it. For starters, we're going to go there, okay? Hang on a second. Nor are those, okay, blah, blah, blah. For there are secondary ends in marriage. Dig that? Hello, he just talked about the secondary ends. That's what he just talked about. Itself, use of the conjugal law, such as mutual assistance and mutual fostering of love. He's using the love act to foster love. No, dog, it's a conjugal act. All right, okay, and so there's secondary ends. You can use those ends, provided, because they're not forbidden to pursue secondary ends. Not forbidden. Got that? That's where he's talking about. However, this is what he gets completely wrong, totally wrong, and it's because they're not forbidden as long as the intrinsic nature of the act and therefore its due ordination to the primary end is always observed. So it's not natural if you do not pursue the primary end. If you do not order it, if it's not ordered to the primary end, it's not natural. You're violating nature. This is why all family planning violates nature, because it's not ordered to the primary end.
Of conjugal love, such as mutual aid and cultivating mutual love, are not acting against nature, which is another way of.
They are acting against nature because, like we just said, you're perverting the order. You're not pursuing the primary end.
Saying it's not intrinsically evil to do so. And then in Pope St. Paul VI encyclical Humani Vitae, he reaffirms this teaching with the caveat that a couple must have just reasons for doing so.
Okay, this is what happened and why Vatican II and why Humani Vitae says a couple must have just reasons. It never had anything to do with justice, ever, until 1951 midwives. Then it turned from a cause of nature to a cause of justice. Let's look at 1951 midwives for a second to see what I'm talking about. Today, besides another grave problem has arisen, namely if and how far the obligation of being ready for the service of maternity, that's code words for the obligation to produce babies, which does not exist. So right here, for the first time ever in the history of the Catholic Church, you have a pope saying it's no longer just nature. Increase and multiply is not nature. It is duty. And it's either one or the other. If you make it duty, you no longer make it nature. Then we have to talk about what's justice. Justifying, like missing mass, you have to justify that. Not having a baby, you have to justify that. No, you don't. You as long as you aren't violating nature doing it. That's all it is. So anyway, here's right here. Like I said, we got to go through these tricky code words, man. It's the reason why this flies under the radar is because people don't come and unearth these words, which they're doing now thanks to the internet. Today, besides another grave problem has arisen, namely how far the obligation of having babies is reconcilable with the ever more general recourse to the periods of natural sterility, the so-called agenesic period in women, which seems a clear expression of a will contrary to that precept. Whoa, like I said, this is where the train left the tracks. They are saying it is a precept to have babies. No, it's not a precept. There is no precept. Increase and multiply is not a precept. Okay. I'm going to get to Aquinas where he explains that, but we'll get there. So then he says, if, however, the husband and wife go further, that is, to limit the conjugal activity exclusively to those periods, then their conduct must be examined more closely. This goes on to explain why there's no way you can say NFP is virtual continence. No way. We're going to get to that in a second. Let's go back to the video.
Which I'll elaborate on in a second. So already we see a massive difference between artificial contraception and the marriage act during times when we know conception is unlikely or even impossible.
Yeah, there's a difference in means, but there's no difference in ends. The end is the conjugal act without a baby. But again, if there is no hierarchy of ends, NFP is perfectly fine. It's just, it's all about if you have an obligation to make babies, and if you have just, it's all it is. It just turns the conjugal act into the same thing as you have keep holy the Sabbath is one commandment and have babies is another commandment. That's all that that's all these NFPers are saying. So you can divorce nature from it. It's just, well, if you got a good it's on a spectrum, you know what I mean? So if missing mass isn't intrinsically evil, then there can be conditions. If not having a baby is not intrinsically evil, then there can be conditions.
The former is intrinsically evil, and the latter, which Pius describes as virtuous continence.
Like I said right there, that was crazy. He just says, one more time. Let's listen to that.
The latter, which Pius describes as virtuous continence.
No. You guys are dead meat, you NFPers. NFP is not virtuous continence. Let's try to hone in on that question, all right? Is NFP virtuous continence? That is the question. Now, oh boy. Number one, it's not virtuous continence because here, let's see, where is it? It's up here, I think. Because here's number one, midwives. He gives the legal definition of NFP for the first time, okay? Here it is. To embrace the matrimonial state, as in to use the conjugal act, and to use continually the faculty proper to that state and lawful only therein. So to continual use. It's not virtuous continence to use continually. There's no such thing. It's not, continence is not continual use. Do you get that? Am I right about that? There's no such thing as, you can't have it. It's no such thing as continence and continual use. NFP is continual use of the conjugal act, and it's avoiding babies. Okay. Then if you do that, if you use the conjugal act and avoid babies, and you're doing so through using a method, that would be a sin against nature. That's what Pius XII said. However, he started to say he added this primary. He said grave reason. First, he calls it a duty and not nature, and then he says it's for a grave reason. So once you add the grave reason and get rid of the nature, you call it a sin against the nature of married life. And a lot of translations change this word from nature to meaning. Okay, let's find out why else NFP can never be called virtuous continence, and it is condemned by Casti Connubii. All right. Let's see right here. Let me find. Okay, there it is. Virtuous continence. And now, venerable brethren, we shall explain the evils opposed to each of the benefits of matrimony. Okay, so he says, first off, the offspring, due to which people are talking about offspring, which many have the boldness to call the disagreeable burden of matrimony, which is to be carefully avoided by married people, not through virtuous continence. Okay, so you can avoid offspring through virtuous continence. That's the only way. That means 0 conjugal acts. That's all it means. But we have a disagreement with Mr. Holdsworth here, because he says NFP is virtuous continence. We just showed that, number one, it's not, because it's continual use. There's no way continual use is continence. Okay. Now, he says, so they're trying not, they don't use virtuous continence, but by frustrating the marriage act to gratify, we already went through this, gratify their desires. Okay, so this shows, basically they're describing NFP here, all right? Now, we also want to find out why else. There's another reason why NFP is not virtuous continence. So, for the first time ever, the church, the Roman Rota, everybody has always said a natural conjugal act must be ordered to the procreation of children. Now we can look at the 1944 Roman Rota right here, where they say this, and they get it from the Latin translation of Casti Connubii. Okay, it says, both matrimony and the use of matrimonial rights have secondary ends which the husband and wife are entitled to view, so long as the intrinsic nature of the act and therefore its due subordination to the primary end is safeguarded. That is the law. That is the interpretation of the church right there. Has never been changed. You can't change it. It's impossible, because you can't change nature. All right? The Rota says if the act is subordinated to the primary end, it has its intrinsic nature. Okay? So what we have going on is a change by Pius XII in 1951, because everyone understood that, look, as long as you're pursuing procreation primary, it's automatically the intrinsic nature of the act is there. That's what makes it natural, is you're not doing IVF, okay, and you are pursuing procreation with a normal conjugal act. That's what makes it natural. If you are pursuing anything else besides procreation, it's not natural. And Aquinas says that's a venial sin, but if you're using a method to not pursue procreation, that's grave sin. And we're going to get to that a little bit. So, like I said, to keep it simple, the church teaches that if it's procreation primary, it's natural. But wait a minute, what did Pius XII do in 1951? Keep your shirt on. Check this out. What did he say? Now, he's saying, look. What about, what about just if people just keep it natural? They're just doing the conjugal act. What difference does it make what day they do it on or what purpose they're pursuing, as long as they're doing the natural act, right? And Pius XII said, so first of all, let's see, the application of this theory applies to husband and wife. If the application of that theory applies that husband and wife may use their matrimonial right even during days of natural sterility, no objection can be made. That's correct. That's correct. The church has always taught that. You don't have to make babies. In this case, they do not hinder or jeopardize in any way the consummation of the natural act and its ulterior natural consequences. So, just because you happen to not be pursuing fertility, you're just letting nature happen. You know what I mean? You're not counting. You're not using any method. That's totally cool because God's in charge of what's going to happen. It is exactly in this that the application of this theory, aka NFP, which we are speaking, differs essentially from, elective sterilization that I already mentioned, which consists in the perversion of the act itself. So, yeah, it does. Sterilization is the perversion of the act, but so is not pursuing procreation. But he can't say that because he's about to endorse perversion of the order. So he says, if instead the husband and wife go further, that is, limiting the conjugal act exclusively to the sterile periods, then their conduct must be examined more closely. The mere fact that the husband and wife do not offend the nature of the act. Whoa, time out right there. Pius XII, you have just left the building. The nature of the act is always procreation primary, always pursuing procreation, natural. It's animal nature. Procreation is the purpose. But now he is saying, oh, no. As long as as long as you're just doing a conjugal act, it doesn't matter what the purpose is. Okay, and are ready to accept and bring up the child, notwithstanding their precautions might be born, would not in itself guarantee the rectitude of their intentions or the unobjectionable morality of their motives. So he has just redefined nature. That's exactly what Pius XII did in Midwives. Nature used to be procreation primary, and now nature is, it's just, nature is just the conjugal act, just the physical and nothing else. Doesn't matter what your intention is, okay? You just as long as you have a grave reason to not have kids, because he's changed it to duty. So he this is where Pius XII, like I said, redefined nature right there, among other places. That's exactly what happened. While we're down here, we can go ahead and read Aquinas, okay? Because we're here now. Aquinas says, on the contrary, the marriage act differs not from fornication except by the marriage goods. Got that? The marriage act is, in a way, it's just fornication unless you can justify it, or unless it can be natural through the procreation. If therefore these were not sufficient to excuse it, marriage would always be unlawful. You have to have an excuse for your conjugal act. It's not natural just doing the physical thing. That's not all it takes to be natural. You must be pursuing procreation. And when you're using NFP, you are not pursuing procreation. Hold on. Here we go. Aquinas also says, he says, I answer, some say that whenever pleasure is the chief motive. Okay, so he goes on and on about, and you can read this. I'm going to put this in the show notes. All right, listen. If pleasure be sought in such a way as to exclude the honesty of marriage, okay, that's honest. So the honesty of marriage means you have to be pursuing procreation or it's dishonest. And like Casti 54, I think, said in Latin, they called it honest continence. Where is it? Right here. It's up here somewhere. I'll find it. Oh, there it is. Yes. This is the Latin version. Venerable brethren, which enjoin upon spouses to be diligently, not by honest continence. So what's dishonest continence? Dishonest continence is NFP. Brian Holdsworth, call your office. Okay? He's saying that virtuous continence, a.k.a. honest continence, is NFP. No, because you are using it for family planning reasons, so you're being dishonest. Okay? You're treating your wife like a prostitute. That's what she is when you're using NFP. Let's get back to Aquinas real quick while we're here. Then we'll go back to the nice video. So, consequently, the right answer to this question is if pleasure be sought in such a way as to exclude the honesty of marriage. What could that mean? That can only mean family planning or onanism or whatever, dude. Okay? Make a baby or don't make a baby. But you don't. It's like trying to make a cake with 0 calories. You can't do that. That's a bad analogy. All analogies are weak in this department. Anyway, you are seeking pleasure in such a way as to exclude the honesty. Yep, that's right. So he just said he says it's virtue to do this. He says it's virtue to do that. Virtuous continence is seeking pleasure in such a way as to exclude the honesty of marriage. That's what he's saying. Okay? So that you're treating your wife not as a wife. Okay. It is a mortal sin. Holdsworth, you're advocating moral sin because you are saying you want to exclude the honesty of marriage. Again, what they've done now is redefine the conjugal act. The primary purpose, it's not a conjugal act anymore. It's a love act. Is procreation primary? No. Personalistic norm is primary. Okay? So, therefore, marital debt is a mortal sin. Marital debt is the new mortal sin. There you go right there. Now you have to have the divorce is not a sin. There's nothing in the contract, annulment on demand, mutual, submission. That's exactly where all this comes from. NFP ushers in destruction of marriage, feminist, French Revolution, egalitarianism. So if you do the conjugal act in such a way as to exclude the honesty of marriage, it's a mortal sin. If, however, the husband seeks pleasure or either spouse seeks pleasure within the bounds of marriage, okay, that means you are not using a method or excluding the honesty in some way, it's a venial sin. So, in other words, you always need to be thinking procreation and you can never do anything to exclude procreation. What is it? I think it's Humanity VT 16 says, all family planning, natural, unnatural, whatever kind of family planning you want to use, it cannot be denied that it's always about not having babies, a.k.a. excluding the honesty of marriage. Boom, right there. Sorry, guys. Let's go back to the video.
Is not. Pius does say that any act that deliberately frustrates the natural procreative power of the marriage act is against nature and therefore intrinsically evil.
That was good. At least he said it's against nature. Anything that directly frustrates. Yeah. So people are saying, well, if I use a barrier method, that's a direct frustration. But if I use a timing method, that's not a direct frustration. It's all the same thing, buddy. Okay? And again, this is why they have to erase the hierarchy of ends, because there's no getting around this stuff. It doesn't matter by hook or by crook. Basically, it doesn't matter how you get to conjugal acts without babies. It doesn't matter how you get there. It's all against nature, unless we redefine nature, which is all theology of the body does.
But he lists that in contrast with, again, what he calls virtuous continence.
We already talked about that. There's no way anyone can call NFP virtuous continence because it's dishonest continence, and it's not even continence because it's the perpetual use. That's what Pius XII said. Everyone knows it. Okay. Virtuous continence is you are like 1 Corinthians 7:4, whatever. You're taking a time out to pray. That's all you're doing that for. You're not trying to avoid babies. You're taking time out to pray. That's all. It's by mutual consent. There is no egalitarian. There is no because of marital debt,
which he says Christian law permits. So what?
Yeah, Christian law does permit that. 1 Corinthians 7:4, but it doesn't permit NFP. That's not, like I said, it's not virtuous continence.
Is today called NFP passes the first box, which is the object.
Okay, totally failed. Brian, you want to talk to me about it? No problem, we can. That would be great. I don't think he's going to, though.
The second question is the intent or the ends. What purpose are you serving by practicing what Pius calls virtuous continence?
He doesn't call it virtuous continence, dude. You got to get over that. It's called treating your wife as a prostitute. That's what St. Augustine says right there in Casti Connubii. So what purpose does it serve? He asks. This is the crazy part. This is where his horse and mule takes over. He lacks understanding, man. He's goofed up. Listen to what he says next. Hang on a sec. Here we go.
What purpose are you serving by practicing what Pius calls?
What purpose are you serving? That's a good question. Why are you doing NFP? Why? Why are you using this conjugal act when you can't have a baby because of grave reason or any why? The answer is because you're pursuing flesh. That is the answer. There is no other answer. That's it. Otherwise, you pray for grace and you have virtuous continence, okay? But no. But listen what he says. He doesn't even explain. You're pursuing the secondary ends without independent of the primary, like Freud talks about right here, man. As long as if you've abandoned reproduction as your aim, you get perversion. The Catholic Church, it's like a Catholic thing he's saying. Hold on, let's see what he says. He says, why are we doing NFP? What is the reason for our conjugal acts while we're trying to avoid what conjugal acts bring?
Virtuous continence. If your reasons are motivated by like a lack of openness to life, or because you simply hate children,
so he's saying some stupid stuff. He's saying, look, openness to life. By the way, openness to life is the phrase you have to justify to keep NFP alive. It's not about being open. You have to be oriented toward.
Because it would interfere with your annual vacation in Mexico, or because you don't want to have to trade your Corvette's parking spot in your garage for a minivan, then I'd argue these are evil reasons that don't pass the second criteria. But if you have what politics calls just causes, then you do have a good reason for avoiding pregnancy through virtuous continence and self-control. Now,
yeah, so like I said, you can't have stupid reasons for missing mass, but you can have just reasons for missing mass. Okay, but NFP is nature. It's not justice. So there is no reason, like Casti 54 says, no reason, however grave, will call it natural. You can't call NFP natural. Impossible.
This is where a lot of people ask the question, what's the list of the causes? And unfortunately, for people who simply want a list of do's and don'ts, there is no such list. This is left up to our prudential judgment and our well-formed consciences. But the principle I would outline according to those teachings is that it should be for serious reasons, like physical or psychological health of either spouse.
Who cares?
Being passed on,
it's
and what they call
stupid.
external circumstances, which would include things like poverty, political instability, detriment of existing children, etc. But the general principle should be that you aren't avoiding pregnancy for selfish reasons like material comfort or convenience, or because you've arbitrarily decided that you're too old, even though there's actually nothing wrong with you, or...
Okay, so he's saying why you can't avoid pregnancy. You can avoid pregnancy for any reason you want, even a frivolous reason if you want. You can't bear, God doesn't like it. He says you're evil if you bear your talents. You got to use your talents. But if you don't want to have kids, you don't have to, because there is no duty. Oh, by the way, let's go to the you got to see this real quick. No duty to procreate. Where hang on a second. What does Aquinas say? What does he say? We got to show you this right here. I got to find it. Let me push pause. Okay, right here. Aquinas, the contract of marriage is not now a matter of precept. So when we had Noah's Ark, they lived 957 years or whatever, and they had 50 kids, 100 kids. They had several wives. We had to get the population going. That's when it was like a precept. There was no celibacy, man. It was all like, make kids. That's what the deal was. That is no longer a precept. This is why Protestants are saying that no celibacy, just get married because you have to. No. Celibacy is better than marriage, higher calling, and it's not a precept anymore. No one needs to have kids. All right. So there is none of this. You need a good reason for NFP. If NFP is natural, you don't need any reason. All right. Let's go back to the video.
Or because of a general negative attitude towards children as a burden rather than a blessing. Our default disposition should be openness to life.
Warning, warning. Our default disposition must be oriented toward procreation. Where this got messed up is when Vatican II said marriage is a love contract, not a procreation contract. That's where the order got switched at Vatican II. It's not binding, but it got switched on paper, so everyone ran with it because everyone wants more love, don't they? The feminists want it, the homos want it, and the people who want to get out of marriage want it. It's entrenched, man, okay? And now it's so institutionalized. So that's why it's Canon 1055. Nature is ordered toward good of the spouses. No, it's not. Nature is not ordered toward good. Nature is ordered toward procreation. It's an error from Vatican II, which made it sway via TOB and all that into the Code of Canon Law. Thank you, John Paul II. So the Code of Canon Law 1055 is wrong when it says marriage is ordered by nature to good of the spouses. No, it's not. Only procreation is natural. The only natural end that's essential. Now we've changed that, and we always have to have good there, so good is the new primary purpose. Sorry, let's go.
That should be normative, and the times when we are avoiding it should be the exception. And if
okay, so yeah, he's just totally, oh brother, is it not obvious? He's said basically he's operating from a love wins perspective. As long as you got love in the room, if someone needs to have kids, you could just keep doing the love thing, okay? As long as you have a good reason, because you're supposed to have babies, because otherwise we're not going to have any babies. We're never going to have more babies until you get rid of NFP. Never. Even though he's got 8 kids or something, more power, but still, everyone used to have 10 kids, and now the birth rate's always going to be low because there's statistically a large majority of people have a hard time. And they're like, whoa, this is over the top. I can't do this.
If you're going into marriage thinking that the exception should be the norm, then I would argue you need an attitude adjustment.
No, this is so stupid. Look, if you just let nature happen, kids happen, and that's it. But there are some super holy types who will go ahead and they'll live a justified marriage. All right, then that's it. All right, man.
He makes the last thing I would say here is that while these criteria can be used to judge your own discernment on these questions, they can't be used to judge other couples.
What he's saying is give everybody a break, okay? You got a bunch of people going to church. They obviously look kind of fertile, man, and they got 2 kids or 4 kids. You can't judge. He's trying to give cover to all these NFPers. Yeah, you can't judge because you have no idea what their situation is, but chances are they're doing NFP, all right? Or they're doing some kind of contraception. That's okay. I'm going to guess right now it's almost all of them that have small families. It's not because they're having fertility problems. Okay, there might be some, but most of it's because they're using some sort of family planning. So he's trying to take away the stigma of I just say, just ask them. If you're curious, say, do you guys do family planning? I'll bet you almost all of them are going to say yes. Almost, of course.
So let's say a couple with few children, and you think, oh, they must be abusing NFP. That's possible. That's a possible conclusion, but that would be a rash judgment on your part because you have no way of knowing.
Of course. So just ask him. That's all. That's all he's doing. He's just running cover. He's for people who aren't having enough kids. Anyway, so I hope I answered all the questions, or I hope I answered the objections good enough. Like I said, this was a tricky one. He threw out some stuff, but we determined that NFP is always a mortal sin. It's not virtuous continence. Anybody who wants to tell me otherwise, don't be shocked. Brian Holdsworth, you take away a little of my energy with all your jive talking, but not all of it. If you're not against NFP, you're not on the team. So go out there and stay toxic. Gen X.
You wanna take away my energy with all your jive talking. I'm telling my lies, yeah. Good loving still gets in my eyes. Nobody believe what you say. It's your jive talking that gets in the way.